The movie is the worst reviewed, with 47% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, worst reviewed Marvel movie of all time. Still an 80% positive audience score, which that sort of gets back to the idea that it's like mobs of trolls review bombing this one. I'm like, if it's mobs of trolls, then the critics score would still be pretty high, because the critics pretty inclined to like a movie like this, and they didn't, and so that's kind of interesting. But here we are. I guess I will start this section by just saying how the mighty have fallen to some extent. I mean, what's the last MCU property that we've talked about that we've been truly excited about?
We haven't on the show.
I mean, we may never have, because we started doing this after Endgame, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the Eternals. Boy, where do we even want to start? Want to start with the plot at all?
Let's do a quick synopsis.
Okay. So the Eternals, basically a group of superpowered beings, a very large group, in fact, come to Earth 7,000 years ago in order to theoretically stop a whole bunch of sort of ravenous monsters from murdering people and sort of taking over the planet. The monsters are called deviants, which is very confusing given what they've already done with Loki, and I don't know why they allowed that to happen. But, well,
it's probably going to tie in.
It may tie in, indeed. But in any case, they're deviant monsters. And the Eternals live on Earth for thousands of years, battling these deviants until about 500 years ago, at which point they believe they have completed their mission and there are no deviants left on the planet. And then they just kind of wait around for a little while, trying to see if somebody, if they're sent here by a celestial Arishem, and they're waiting around for the word that they can come home, basically. But instead, they never get that word, so they just kind of split up and go their separate ways. And for 500 years, they've just been living among humans, doing their thing. Some of them are in relationships now. Some of them are, just kind of wandering around the Earth. Some of them are
cult leaders.
Yeah, whatever. Right?
Bollywood stars. Right, whatever. So anyway.
Does.
A deviant attacks one of the Eternals, and they have to get the band back together and fight these deviants again. That's basically it. And obviously, there's some twists and some things that we will talk about when we get into spoilers, because there's kind of a big twist that I don't want to reveal until we've talked about it for a minute. But we will get into the spoilers probably in about 10 minutes. So
yeah,
let's just get to there. But Paul, what did you think of the Eternals?
So, this just goes along with how I felt with the MCU the last couple of years since the end of Endgame.
Yeah.
To be fair, I'm not particularly inclined to like these movies. I don't really like Marvel movies all that much.
Yeah.
But this one in particular was bad, and it's not a bad as in Black Widow bad, which was just felt rushed and half-baked and kind of whatever. It's
weird and kind of absurd in many ways, yeah.
That story at least made sense. This cost more to make than Dune, and it looked terrible.
Didn't look great.
No, and the story was convoluted. The CGI was flat. The worst CGI Marvel graphics you could think of. The acting is some of the worst acting I have seen in a long time, and I don't particularly like to go after actors just because it's usually the material they have to work with.
Yeah, there is. I do think it's kind of funny because acting it's very important in this process, but people overstate how much control the actor has.
Right, and the reason why they talk about because the two main characters, Cersei and Ikaris.
Yeah, so that's Gemma Chan and Richard Madden from Game of Thrones. If you recall, we've got two Game of Thrones guys, two brothers.
Yeah, so
yep.
They just compared to the rest of the cast, they're pretty wooden. Don't really care about them.
Yep.
But I don't know if it's necessarily all of them. I think it's a lot of the story.
Yeah.
This I think the most interesting stuff about this movie is not necessarily about the movie, but just really the state of play of what this movie came out.
Yeah.
It's not currently showing in China. It was directed by Chloe Zhao, who is
Chinese,
who's not particularly liked by the CCP, I guess.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Disney is continuously, we've talked about this on the podcast a lot.
Yeah.
Disney's trying to get movies into China. This one's not there.
Yep.
Now, so what are you doing? But just going back to the movie, it's too long. It's
what did you say? 2 hours and
37 minutes.
37 minutes.
It's
a long one,
and it's just the worst of Marvel. That's what I could say. It's a bad CGI, bad acting, story is too convoluted, and everything's just packed in. And
Jen, do you agree or disagree?
This movie was boring and awful, and I didn't care about anybody in it or what was happening, even when I had a sense of what that was. It was not always clear what was happening or why or anything like that. This failed on every single level, and I am unspeakably disappointed. Like, I went in with low expectations. I heard that this was not Marvel's best, and I tempered my expectations accordingly, I thought. But man, like, expectations were low, but wow. Like, whew.
Yeah,
it was a disaster.
I feel largely the same way. I think that I didn't have very high expectations for this either. I mean, some of that was just, even from the beginning of the advertising campaigns, it just seemed super flat. And, you'll notice that at no point did they ever have anything that really even rose to the level of what I'd call excitement or humor, even in any of the promos or trailers or any of that kind of stuff. Everything felt super generic. And I'll use this as sort of an emblematic of that problem, right? Is that every one of these Eternals has their own unique power. And first of all, that doesn't make any sense. So we can get into just the numerous things that don't make any sense about the construction of the Eternals as a team and why they exist and all that kind of stuff. Although we're going to have to spoil some things to have that conversation. But let's say every one of these has a unique power, except for every one of them looks exactly the same. It's some generic sort of yellow, amber, golden sort of energy blast or energy shape, or, sort of, it's like, when Doctor Strange, like the effect for Doctor Strange's shield came up and we started seeing like that sort of golden kind of like intricate pattern thing happen, and Marvel started putting that everywhere. And so now we've got Gilgamesh, who has a gauntlet made out of that kind of golden energy. You've got Athena, who has like spears and shields made out of that stuff. You've got Icarus, who shoots those beams out of his eyes, and Kingo, who has just
finger guns.
Finger
he has
guns.
Literal finger guns.
He can do a Kamehameha, though, so there's that.
Pretty lame one.
It's not a great one, and it takes him a good long while to rev it up. But
But you know
whatever.
What? On brand.
I also felt like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity for somebody like Kumail Nanjiani to not just do Kame.
That's probably copyrighted.
It is probably copyrighted. You probably can't do it. But in any case, everybody looks the same. All their powers are they're funny because they're different, except for they're all still completely interchangeable. And you could swap one character out for another character, and I wouldn't know from their personalities. There was this the Red Letter Media guys ages and ages ago in their first, I think it was in their episode 1 breakdown, which is like, the biggest thing the Red Letter Media guys ever did. Like they talked about, when they got into the section talking about the characters, Mike Stoklasa talked about the idea of, and I don't know, maybe Jay wrote it, but if you took this character and you could not describe them using physical attributes, like you couldn't tell me what they looked like or what they did, how would you describe these characters? And I'd like to apply that test to this movie. Like, if I told you, describe to me Athena, Angelina Jolie's character in this movie, but you can't tell me that she's played by Angelina Jolie, she looks like Angelina Jolie, or she has spear things.
Well, I think you chose the wrong character. She's the only one that actually had an interesting story.
No, she had an interesting story, but I'm saying describe her personality.
She's a warrior that has PTSD.
Okay.
That's it.
It's the closest you can get, but
Yeah.
Ajax?
Selma Hayek.
Selma Hayek?
I don't, nothing. But yeah, no.
Well, and maybe worst of all, right? Cersei. British, sort of. I don't know.
She has feelings about things.
She likes Earth more than the other ones do.
I mean, I guess.
I don't know. Look, I'd be hard pressed to define specific personality traits for any of these characters, including Angelina Jolie's character. I think she has the most interesting story.
Yeah.
But it's told, it's told so superficially and so quickly,
right,
that it doesn't even matter.
Right.
Icarus is
Superman
with no moral values or interesting things to say or charisma. So,
the new Superman.
More aggro as well.
More aggro as well. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, every one of these characters is so thin. Yeah. But part of that is like you've got, 10 of them.
It's way too many.
And you've got to try to introduce and develop all of these characters in the span of 2 hours. And it takes 2 hours to even really introduce all of them, let alone giving any semblance of character development to any of them. They're just, I don't care. I don't care about any of them.
No.
And because they tried to do too many characters in this movie, the pacing was all wrong. The plot itself might have been interesting and cool to watch if we'd actually gotten it in any sort of reasonable amount of time. But because they had to take all those breaks to do all that character development, which weren't effective because there were too many characters, nothing worked.